Well, that's close enough for government work. I show 4 o'clock. I'm going to call this meeting, special meeting of the EVIT District 401 Governing Board to order and ask, I don't know if she's there or not, Edith Perez to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. That brings us to item 3, call to the public. Dr. Wilson, do we have anything here?
No, sir, we do not.
That brings us to item 4, personnel. 4A is request for classified and certified personnel. Do I have a motion?
Also move, Covington.
I'll second. Can we combine the two items?
No, he's got a
As
motion.
far as I'm concerned, we can. I don't know if Kevin has a
Mr.
problem.
Covington would be willing to restate his motion.
I'll restate the motion to include A and B. Personnel.
I'll second the amended motion.
First, is Kevin there and do we have a problem with that legally?
No, you can vote on that.
Okay. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask Ms. Boggs to call for the vote.
Ms. Boggs, you're muted.
Pardon?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I need to know who's here, first of all, before
So
I
I
start
think-
calling.
Ms. Boggs, you have Mr. Watkins, Ms. Doolin, Ms. Hobson, Mr. Covington, and Mr. Lane.
Okay. All right. Ready? Lane,
Aye.
Covington,
Aye.
Doolin,
Aye.
Boggs is an I, Hobson,
Aye.
and Watkins.
Aye. Motion carried. That brings us to item 5. 5A is a transportation request for waivers from J.O. Combs and Queen Creek. Dr. Wilson.
Mr. President, members of the governing board, as was mentioned previously, we have 2 transportation waiver requests, which is part of the IGA requirement. Both are requesting that the waiver be granted to not transport students to EVIT in the AM. The transportation waiver requests are coming from J.O. Combs and Queen Creek Unified School District. Their situations are a little bit different, but the end result is still the same. In J.O. Combs's case, their number of buses they have as a district isn't sufficiently large enough to allow them to transport their elementary, middle school, high school, and an EVIT run in the AM. But because of the bell schedules, they have the flexibility in the afternoon to do that. So committing a bus to EVIT in the morning would preclude them from having the opportunity to transport whether it be an elementary or middle school or high school run. Queen Creek is a little bit different. In talking to their administration, their issue is that they're having a hard time finding drivers. And so for them to release one of their drivers to run an EVIT AM transportation route would preclude them from having that driver run the route needed to get students to either their elementary, middle school, or high school. In both situations, the administration's indicated that students from their district could attend EVIT in the AM if they had their own transportation. They just are in a position of not being able to transport for the 2 reasons I described.
I have a question. For each of those districts, do we have a rough estimate of how many kids that would attend main campus and how many would attend Power Road?
So I don't off the top of my head. Obviously more students from Queen Creek are apt to attend Power in our cosmetology and health science and vet tech buildings. We don't at this current time don't have a ton of industrial trades out at Power. So the ability for Queen Creek students to do that would mean they would have to come to main campus. Combs is split about evenly depending upon the interest of the students. The number is obviously going to be greater for Queen Creek because it's a bigger district. Percentage-wise, Combs has historically sent us a percentage, a respectable percentage of eligible students to attend. They most often, they'll just have attended in the afternoon.
Yeah, I kind of share your concern. You can communicate it in your second paragraph there.
That's the concern that I described is that there's always this narrative in the back of my mind, and then not necessarily specifically in these two situations, but just across the board, that not having students come to EVIT in the AM means that it creates a greater likelihood of students having the opportunity to take 4 classes at their home high school, which allows them to have a full funded FTE. And we know statutorily, we can't, our sending districts can't prevent students from coming in the AM to get the full funded FTE or ADM. And so, but there's nothing that tells me that that's the decision. There's nothing that tells me that that's why they're making the waiver request. And especially in the context of them acknowledging that students could attend if they could provide their own transportation. But that is going to be a concern of mine, quite honestly, in a lot of situations like that, because I do believe that there's an inherent desire by some to have students get fully funded at their home school before they're released to come to us.
Oh, no. I have a question, I think, if I can remember. How many students would we lose if we said no? I mean, if we say these students have to make their own transportation, how many students would we lose in the morning because of this without having bus transportation that's supposed to be in the IGA?
So I want to make sure I'm understanding the question correctly. So when I respond, if I didn't understand it correctly, please correct me. The IGA has a provision where if there is a discrepancy, there are some provisions to navigate that discrepancy. So simply, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, simply saying no doesn't require them to automatically start transporting. I think it triggers in it then pieces to the IGA that are designed to resolve conflicts between us. They would be out of compliance with the IGA, which might carry with it a longer term condition. But just because you say no doesn't mean they're automatically going to say, okay, we're going to find the driver or we're going to buy a new bus. So to answer your question, to me that I don't know that we're going to lose any more than what currently exists, because I don't think they have scheduled students to come here in the AM. They've scheduled them to come here in the PM. Our issue that we were navigating with them is that isn't what the IGA allows. And if that's the intent and the rationale is that, as described, then the sending districts need to get approval of EVIT's governing board for that. And that's what they're seeking, but that doesn't mean that they're going to change their master schedules and start busing kids in the AM, whether you approve it or not, in my opinion.
I got your nod. Kevin. So basically what you're saying is they haven't scheduled people in the morning, so it doesn't make any difference.
They've scheduled some. I mean, we do have some students coming in the AM and they're on their own transportation. So we will have some of those students here. I think the challenge with it becomes is at what's the intent of the IGA? And if their reasoning is valid, then it's within EVIT's governing board's right to waive that. But the question is it, do you believe that it's valid? And there's nothing that they have said to me that would indicate that it's not. But as Mr. Lane alluded to, there's always going to be that overarching concern that there are reasons beyond what we're being described. But I don't know that for fact.
Just for the record, I share Mr. Lane's concern as well. And I wanted to make sure that legally we're okay approving or denying the waiver. We're on solid ground. Correct?
Correct. You can approve it or not approve it. Either way, you're okay.
Okay.
So are there classes available in the morning for students of that district that may or may not be available in the afternoon at our location?
So I think it's just the opposite. I think there are classes that are available in the morning that aren't available in the afternoon, if it were to be any of those, because we certainly have more space available in the morning than we do the afternoon. All of the sections run both. All of the sections run both AM and PM, most of them anyway. But we're far more stacked in the PM than we are in the AM.
Okay. So there's more available seats in the mornings.
Absolutely.
Are there particular course numbers that are only taught in the mornings and not in the PM?
No.
But right now, are we sold out on the afternoons or very close?
In many programs we are, especially in some of those high demand welding, auto, cosmetology. Those, some of our health sciences, those are programs that have filled, early on. And to be fair, I mean, this is part of, I think, the conversation that Kevin and I need to have as we talk about the IGA and you give us direction next year. This isn't the first communication. I mean, there have been other districts that we've heard students say to us, oh, I have to switch my AM to PM, my sending district. And that carries with it some of the same concerns that I described. Is it, what's the reason for that?
Yeah, but it's an individual, not a block.
Correct.
And so they entered into, have we had this issue in prior school years? Was this the third, how long are the IGAs? 3 years?
3 years. We've had J.L. Combs for 3 years because of their transportation issue.
And they just started secondary. They were.
Yes, they consolidated a number of years ago, but yes, they haven't always been a consolidated district. They were an elementary.
Uh-huh.
And, one of the, I think in fairness to Queen Creek, one of the challenges is that if it is such a big district to the southeast of us, that creates another layer of a challenge of having to transport all the way.
They're also getting sudden growth.
Oh, they are.
Stipend on top, or whatever
Yeah.
you want to call it, on top of their ADM, which is pretty significant.
I think they're just, again, according to their administration, the issue is that they just can't find drivers.
Well, they just steal them from Mesa. We train them. Everybody else steals them. Nobody else trains drivers. If they want to, if they really want drivers, they'll arrange a training.
My question I have is how will this affect teachers if all of a sudden they don't have AM classes? Are we going to lose some teachers because of this?
No, like I said, I don't think that there's going to be a massive amount of students that are going to withdraw from AM and only go to PM, because my guess is that this is how they've scheduled it.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around how many kids are total from each district. What does that look like? If they want to send 500 kids and they only want to do it in the afternoon, that's a problem.
Yeah, to be,
If it's 15, maybe not.
J.L. Combs has obviously a smaller enrollment number in total. So therefore their numbers, even if it's 10% of their eligible population, that's not going to be a large number. Queen Creek is obviously a larger district than J.L. Combs, but to be fair, I don't know that we get a ton of participation out of Queen Creek at EVIT. Anyway, I mean, when we're talking about the large numbered districts that send students, it's the Mesas, it's the Gilberts, it's the Chandlers. Those are the ones that tend to send the bulk of the students.
Well, a little bit off, but I think we're overlooking a big opportunity. That far southeast part of the valley is, this growth has been so sudden and explosive. There's not a lot of options in welding and auto, and even construction technology. I think we need to look to getting even if we can't put it on our campus out there, there's some real estate available to rent to put something up and get it going.
I'm all for it.
So, and I think I'm not real comfortable with doing it, especially if we haven't done it the first 2 years. It makes it really hard, but I think we couch that with we're gonna, and in good faith, we need to say this, we're gonna see if we can get some of these programs off the ground, because we started today, it's 5 years before we could get something going at Power Campus, like on those campuses or the
buildings.
Well, buildings and all that, but I'm sure.
We have welding coming.
We do. We have a small section of welding coming.
Very small, and that'll be overbooked before long, and the aircraft guys will be crying because they get pushed out the door.
Well, the good thing is that through the expansion out there, we also know that we're going to have more room in cosmetology. We're going to have more room in vet assistance because it gets bigger, health sciences. But you're right, we don't have the industrial trades, and you know that.
And they desperately need that.
I agree. So, but Mike,
But I know that's off the subject, but I think it needs to trigger another really serious look at something, those in particular. Who knows? ASU may have some hangar space or some other empty building sitting out there that we could lease for, you know,
Like,
for $1 a year or something and get
try for
those off
50
the
cents.
ground.
so to get back to to this subject real quick, are these couched together as one vote, or are they going to be separated? My request is that they're two separate.
you can separate it. Whoever makes the motion.
I'll make the motion, but I would like them separated. So when I'll make a motion and make them separate. But before we go to that, the last thing I want to say is I think there's a big difference in I can't find drivers versus we don't have a bus. So for me, that's a big difference because we have had a hard time finding faculty, and we went back to our compensation package and realized the reason we can't find people is because we're not paying enough. So I just want to point some of that out.
Yeah.
Rhonda, I also have another question that if we can do that, is just do it for the first semester until their drivers are found. Trying to have someone for second semester driving in the morning.
That puts the kids in a bad place. So
That's not good for the kids.
We can always approve it later in December if they need to extend it.
Or you could do it year by year too.
Well, that is your
It's-
budget.
Well, let's all remember, even if we vote no, even if we were to vote no, it doesn't mean that they're going to start busing. It just means we go to some mediation where we sit down and look and talk about these things. So I think there is some common ground that could happen by having that conversation.
Okay.
And there's really no reason why those two districts couldn't get together and one provide a driver and one provide a bus because they're very proximate to each other.
I think everything that is being said is correct. I think there's potentially a lot of different solutions. I guess the challenge with it is that what they've communicated to us is what is being presented, and if that isn't what is, there's reasons why they're presenting that, and there's rationale that maybe you can use to say you disagree with that, but I don't know that they're going to necessarily want us to give them advice on how to fix it. I think the conversation
Well,
is
I guess that would come up.
as
in
Ms. Doolin had
mediation.
indicated, it opens the door for a conversation about what really can happen and what recourse do we have as the CTED ultimately, if districts aren't in compliance with the IGA. Conversely, it also makes us have to make, and which is a good thing, be sure that we're in compliance with all parts of the IGA ourselves, right? Because
Who bears the cost of a mediation according to our IGA?
I would have to look at the IGA to figure that out.
Because those aren't cheap.
No, they are not. But the IGAs expire at the end of this school year. So we're going to be renegotiating them anyway. So we can have this same conversation in the context of renegotiating the IGAs rather than going to mediation.
Now,
And to Ms. Doolin's
I
point,
would say it's a hard no on a long-term basis.
well, and Ms. Doolin's point is if we couldn't start busing, in the spring semester because it would be too disruptive for the students. If we don't have this ironed out before school starts, it's going to be the same problem. They're going to have started in the PM. We're not going to move to the AM.
I would feel more comfortable if we were having this discussion with a motion on the table.
Hey,
I'll make
Rhonda.
a motion. I'll
Pardon?
make the motion to approve, I guess. Well, can you tell me, I don't have it right in front of me. Is it A and B?
No, it's just
No.
by name.
It's one letter.
It's one letter. So can I make a motion first to
Separate.
separate the two schools?
You may.
I'd like to make a motion to consider this agenda item in two separate, one for J.O. Combs and one for Queen Creek School District.
I'll second that.
Now,
we need to-
I
now,
don't know. We need to vote.
Call the question.
Yeah, I think you have to vote that, don't you?
Yes,
I'm
we
not
need a
sure we
vote.
even needed to do that. The motion would stand on its own.
Oh, we got another one.
well, now that we have a motion and a,
Just vote on it.
yeah, let's vote on it.
Okay.
Ms.
Somebody's
Boggs,
got their mic on, needs to turn their mic off.
Mr. Freedom's on there twice.
There,
I finally got on here.
yeah, he's on twice.
You want to repeat the motion so the one people that just showed up know what we're voting on?
I'm making the motion to separate the two and consider J.O. Combs' request separately from Queen Creek.
do we have a second?
I have already
Lane
seconded.
did.
Now, is there any discussion?
Jeff, Jeff Freedom here.
Yes, go ahead.
I missed what the Combs thing was.
I couldn't hear what he-
He's got
So,
two
Mr.
devices
Fle-
going. Mr. Freedom has two devices going on. That's
Mr.
why-
Fleetum, you need to log out of your iPhone. Your iPhone is also on with your computer. You need to log out of your iPhone. We're getting feedback.
Oh, hold on. Are you still getting feedback?
Your
Nope.
iPhone is still logged in.
That's my iPad.
Okay,
Oh, whatever.
A hammer will work.
So I am not logged in to anything other than my iPad.
okay, it's
Okay.
better now.
We're on
Okay,
action
now
items.
can we call for,
We
now
lost
can we call
someone.
for the vote?
I need someone to restate the Combs comment.
Ms. Doolan?
Maybe he should,
Jeff,
unless we're gonna go all the way back through it, he should. maybe-
So I guess, Ms. Doolin, if I'm understanding your motion correctly, you want to separate the items into two action items, one separately from J.O. Combs and the second one for Queen Creek Unified School District. Is that correct?
Correct, because I believe their reasons for asking are very different.
And Mr. Lane seconded that. So in my understanding, if you're ready to vote on that motion, then we'll tackle each action item independently after the motion is approved.
Correct.
So can I ask a question? So the motions are to do, the actions are to do what? That's
Separate the two districts.
instead of one vote for both districts, we're separating the districts or a vote for each district.
what kind of thing are we voting on?
We're on
We're on the agenda.
action item number 5, transportation waivers for J.O. Combs
Okay.
and Queen Creek.
Okay,
Action
thank
item
you very
5.
much. Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Now, Ms. Boggs. Oh, further discussion? Ms. Boggs, call for the vote.
Lane,
Aye.
Covington,
Aye.
Doolin.
Aye.
Boggs is an aye. Johnson,
Aye.
Freedom,
I think he said aye.
Aye.
he said aye. Hobson,
Aye.
and Watkins.
Aye. Motion carried. Then let's handle J.O. Combs first.
I'll make a
separately.
motion. I'll make a motion to approve J.O. Combs' request.
I will
Do we have a
second.
second?
Boggs
Do
is
we-
a second.
Now, any discussion? Then I'll call for the vote. Ms. Boggs?
Lane,
Aye.
Covington,
No.
Doolin,
Aye.
Boggs is an aye. Johnson,
Aye.
Freedom,
Aye.
Hobson,
Aye.
and Watkins.
Aye. Motion carried. Now we'll handle Queen Creek. Do I have a motion? Did I lose my audio?
No, you didn't. There's an
I'll make the
elephant.
motion so we can vote on it and discuss it. I'll make a motion to approve Queen Creek's request.
A second.
I'll second.
Having a motion and a second, now we'll have discussion, and I have a feeling there will be some. So, discussion.
Again, I'm going to state what I stated earlier. I think there's a big difference between we don't have a bus and I can't find a driver. And I know through some experience of worse being on a school board that there is potentially maybe some salary discrepancies that could be used to find a driver.
I tend to agree with that, for what it's worth, having been a school bus driver.
There's a
also
job for
agree.
you.
Yeah. No, thank you.
See, we can't use Uber, right?
Any further discussion? Ms. Boggs, I'll call for the vote.
Lane,
It's the motion on the table. No.
Covington,
No,
Doolin,
No,
Boggs is no also. Johnson,
Johnson's not here.
yes.
Oh, yes,
Hi.
never mind.
Did
There
you
you are.
vote?
Said no.
Okay. Fleetum,
No.
Hobson,
No.
Watkins.
No. Motion defeated. I think that brings us to 5B, a request for EVIT CTDS number for Higley Virtual Academy. Dr. Wilson?
Mr. President, members of the governing board, this was an item that we touched on briefly prior to in terms of getting advice whether or not it is first legal, which it is, and then secondarily, what are some concerns? Some concerns were raised about the program itself, and so we did a little bit of homework in terms of reaching out to Higley Unified School District as a reminder. This is the programs have been approved. What's being approved here is the CTDS number, which allows Higley to upload to the state of Arizona for their ADM count. It's for cybersecurity and for coding. And some of the questions that were raised prior were questions around what are some unique, what are some things that make this program career and technical education compliant in terms of extra product and merchandise and components. And there is extra software. The students also, the question was raised about the bandwidth. Higley, the students that are enrolled in virtual high school in total. And so the bandwidth from Higley's end hasn't been a problem, nor has it been a problem for the students. But if it were a problem, Higley has hotspots that the students are able to go access and utilize. One of the things that I would want to make sure the governing board is aware of is that what this program is asking and doing is no different than what any of the other cybersecurity and coding programs are doing across the state. It just happens to be housed virtually versus a brick and mortar program. It's programs that are approved by ADE's CTE program list. So Higley is requesting the CTDS number from EVIT governing board approval.
Anything further? Do I have a motion?
I will make the motion that we deny their request.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Is there any discussion? Then I'll call for the vote.
If I could, Mr. Watkins. So the motion to deny the request, I'm assuming if that's granted, then we would be somewhat obligated to go back and deny programming of all cybersecurity and coding that we have approved in our satellites, because I don't understand how this is marketably different than those. And that's okay, but I just don't want us to be disingenuous, including our own. I mean, we're running the same programs here. So I just don't want to be disingenuous that if we're not going to approve it
But we're requiring our students to appear in class.
Correct. And I think one of the things that, yes, that's a fair point. I think one of the things that has been a challenge for us though, and we were very clear that we believe current technical education is best done hands-on. And I believe that absolutely to be the case for 95% of our programs. But I do believe there are some programs that essentially function as online, even though they come here. And those happen to be the coding, the cybersecurity. In fact, we had, I think at the beginning of the year, last year, a gentleman came forward and said, hey, why do I, my son wants to take cybersecurity or coding. Why would he have to drive all the way down to your campus when essentially that is uploaded on the platform here and done as an online class here? There's direct instruction person here, but I think there are some programs in the current technical education field that online doesn't do a disservice to. And I think it happens to be in the areas of technology.
Yeah, but are these kids going to be able to get started and launched? There's no interaction with, any interaction with the instructor if you're in person happens very quickly, where it's all online. That's going to be a minimum probably of 24 hours realistically before they get feedback from an instructor. And yeah, I'll grant you that probably 75% have no problem, but what do we do with the other 25% that just can't get it together and get started? Maybe after they get started a few weeks and figure a few things out, but unless they're, I don't know anything about this institution, if they're really selective and only take certain kids, but you got to know, what happens if the kid with an IEP or a 504 comes in there and needs that extra help. Where if they were in classroom, we could do that.
I think you make valid points. I guess that where I get stuck is I'm not sure that it's our responsibility to try to legislate or define how they're going to operationalize those variables. Meaning, it
is our responsibility because we're taking over. They're sending that student to us to instruct, and every other student, and that student could argue that I failed because I didn't get the same resources as someone sitting in the classroom did.
True. I mean, I guess, again, just playing devil's advocate, one of the things I would be cautious of my guess is that we could say that some of our sending districts have teachers in the classroom that are subpar, and the students that are sitting in those classrooms are getting lesser of an opportunity because of the teacher than there isn't. And yet that we don't lean into the idea of saying we're going to monitor whether the teacher's subpar or not. Our responsibility is to make sure that they're appropriately certified.
Yeah.
Right. So I want, and again, not my decision, it's yours. I just want us to be mindful that not to lean into an area that is beyond the scope of what our role and responsibility is. And that's
so where do we go if we get a kid with an IEP or 504 that struggles to even get going in this thing?
Again, in my mind, it would be up to Higley Unified School District because it's their program and it's their school, just like it would be up to, Chaparral High School if it was brick and mortar.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess I'm thinking that because it's virtual, we're going to be responsible. And so I guess I'm just operating on a faulty thinking. So with that being said, I would like to withdraw the motion that I made.
I'll second that. Now we need a new motion.
Now we need a motion.
We have a motion that's been withdrawn and a motion to second that. Am I correct?
Yep.
Yeah. I
Is there-
don't know that we do. If we remove the motion, it dies.
We still need to vote on it though, as I understand it.
If
Then
it's
I'll
withdrawn,
call-
there's no motion there.
You have to vote on the motion to withdraw.
Is there any discussion before we vote?
Okay.
Ms. Boggs, call for the vote.
We're voting to withdraw. Is that correct?
To withdraw my
Withdraw
motion.
the motion.
Okay, just making sure.
Going back to the start again.
Okay, back to the start. Lane, Covington,
Aye.
Doolin,
Aye.
Boggs is an aye, Johnson,
Aye.
Leadham,
Aye.
Hobson,
Aye.
and Watkins.
Aye. Motion carried.
All right.
Now, as I understand it, do we have a motion again on the CTDS number for Higley Virtual Academy?
So
Jeff
moved.
Fleetum here. I so move that we approve the CTDS number for Higley Academy. Higley Unified, excuse me.
Do we have a second?
I will second. Boggs.
Is there any discussion now? Ms. Boggs, call for the vote.
Lane,
Aye.
Covington,
Aye.
Doolin,
Aye.
Boggs is an I. Johnson,
Aye.
Fleetum,
Aye.
Hobson,
Aye.
and Watkins.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
That brings us to 5C, I believe, sick leave, COVID sick leave. Dr.
Mr. President, members of the governing board,
Meetings.
is he okay?
Sorry.
Throughout the last school year and then going into this school year, there's been the option for districts to provide extended leave for COVID illnesses for our employees, and reimbursement for those costs are covered by the ESSER funds. The request is that should we have a staff member who has tested positive, that he or she not have the time that they're away from campus be taken from their personal sick time, that it be covered through the COVID fund established by the ESSER dollars.
I'll make a motion to approve this sick leave for COVID.
I'll second.
We have a motion to approve the sick leave and a second. Do I have any discussion?
I have a question for Dr. Wilson. Will the ESSER funds continue to be accessible throughout the school year?
Yes, they will be. And conceivably, I think even into.
Only till September 30th.
Only until
Isn't it?
September
Okay.
30th.
Mhm.
Okay.
What was that discussion?
Um, Correct me if I'm wrong, Edith. I thought the federal government said we can have a voluntary program through September 30th for the sick leave.
Right, I was just clarifying that the funds are accessible through the 2023, but you're right, in terms of the request for the COVID leave is only through September 30th.
So of this year, so anything after that, we're paying that
Out of our regular sick.
out of our M and O.
Yes.
And will
Correct.
that, so we're just waiving the deductions from their vacation pool.
It's not vacation. It's
Sick
PT,
leave.
it's sick leave.
Well, sick leave, personal time off.
Sure, the proposal is to extend the COVID sick leave through September 30th. After that, it'll just go back to the normal sick leave program.
Is that what is that the nature of our vote?
Well,
I thought
that's,
it looked like to me it was covering the whole school year.
well, if you look at the
Maybe I didn't read it.
recommended action, the bottom section says 80 hours per employee through September 30th, 2021, to be funded through the ESSER funds. And certainly, the governing board has the ability to come back October 1st and extend it to the end of May through.
Okay, so we're only voting from now until the end of September.
Yep.
For clarification, can we get a definition of the ESSER funds and their origination?
ESSER funds are the funds that have been released by the federal from the CARES Act.
Not familiar with that. Is that ESS? Is that, what is that?
Yes, that's the.
ESSER.
ESSER, and it's just the acronym for the
ESSER.
federal funds being released to offset COVID costs for organizations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, can we have the motion read again? I'm not sure what we're to vote on.
I'll repeat it. I vote that we extend the COVID sick leave, and I'll add in there through September 30th, 2021.
Nice, I second.
And did we have a second?
Dave Lane seconded.
Any further discussion? Ms. Boggs, will you call for the vote?
Lane,
Aye.
Covington,
Aye.
Doolin,
Aye.
Boggs is an aye, Johnson,
Aye.
Fleedham,
Aye.
Hobson,
Aye.
and Watkins.
Aye. Motion carried. That brings us to 5D, the safe return to in-person schooling, which we never left, but Dr. Wilson.
Mr. President, members of the governing board, I've used a lot of words tonight, and I thought this is where I was going to use a lot of words. So one of the requirements we have to reopen is to update our in-person learning plan. And as Mr. Watkins alluded to, I find it a bit ironic because we never really closed, but we do what we're asked to do, right? And there's not a ton of changes in there because we were modifying it throughout the process, and because our plan was predicated on us being in person, a lot of what we have in place is going to be applicable. But there are a couple things that I just want you to be aware of, and one in particular. The first is obviously there's no mask requirement, although students and staff are allowed to if they feel appropriate for them. Physical distancing has been modified from 6 feet down to greater than 3 feet, and this is per the CDC guidelines. Where things began to get a little bit wonky for us is as we started talking about and thinking on how we're going to process students that have or staff that have tested positive, because we know that's going to happen, as well as a possible exposure. And were different lines of thinking and thought as it relates to that. But there was I don't know what you call it, but the governor had made a decision that, or an interpretation that treating individuals that are students that are vaccinated differently than students that are non-vaccinated in the quarantine protocols was discriminatory. Clearly, there's differing schools of thought on whether that's factual or not. I know there are a number of attorneys that will say it's not discriminatory, and you know that becomes a whole different conversation. Our thought process throughout the development of the reopening plan was to look for solutions that just seem to make sense, and by that, just kind of bread and butter just seems to make sense. And so around that, we began the discussion of saying, well, if I'm a student that is vaccinated, we know that although it's not 100% assurance, we know that a vaccinated student has much less risk with the COVID and even the COVID variants than a non-vaccinated student. And an individual that isn't vaccinated made that decision for reasons that are personal to them, and they have a right to make those decisions. And so when we start talking about how we're going to handle positive cases on our campus, we came to the conclusion of saying that, you know, a student or staff member that tests positive has to quarantine as they had to at the end of last year. I think that is something that everybody seems to think is reasonable. What our recommendation is then is for a student that is positive in a class, there'll be two different sets of communication that go out to that student, to those students. Well, to some of those students. All of the students will receive an email indicating that there was a positive case in the student's class. So the students will receive that, the parents will receive that, and be aware that there was a confirmed case within that classroom. If that student that was confirmed positive had contact with individuals as defined by the CDC guidelines, then we will reach out like we've had in last year, to the individuals and their parents saying that based on the CDC guidelines, your son or daughter was exposed to the coronavirus, and we want you to be aware of that. In both situations, though, we will not ask any of the potentially exposed students to self-quarantine. What we will want to allow for is for parents to make the decision that they think is in the best interest of their student and their family. So as an example, when my son was here, if there was a positive case in his class, my wife would get an email, I'd get an email, and we would then have a decision or choice to say whether we wanted my son to stay home or not. And if we chose to say yes, then he'd be excused per the guidelines of that quarantine period of time. If we were to say, no, we're comfortable with him coming back to school, then he would come back to school. The point in having people be aware, though, that there was a positive case is that there could be some students and some families that didn't receive the vaccine, but for health reasons, religious reasons, that would want to know that information and act accordingly. So our hope is that we provide as much information as we can and give parents the right and the choice to make the decision that's in the best interest of them and their family, while recognizing that students that have the vaccine have a different, are less likely to have a negative reaction if there was the virus in their classroom. And ultimately leave it up to the parent and the student, once they have the information, to make the decision as to whether they quarantine. That was a lot of words. That was a word salad.
You're good at it.
So I don't know that I explained it well enough, but if I didn't, please feel free to ask questions.
I have one question. In the students who test positive for COVID will be quarantined. Okay, they said that you can return after 5 days if they have a negative, a positive test, they don't have, well, that's negative, I don't know. So
Right.
if they don't have COVID, and then they come back. Or they can wait 14 days.
Mhm.
Do they have to have, after 14 days, do they need a test to show that they don't have COVID? Or after 14 days, it's a miracle that they don't have it?
No, so it's our understanding through the CDC that after the 14-day period of time that the virus is no longer transmissible, although a student may still test positive. And there are some individuals that have tested positive for weeks after contracting the virus, but they're no longer transmitting the virus. There are some students that and the reason why it's the 5 is because as the CDC's modified their understanding of the virus, that by day 5, 6, 7, if there's going to be, if the student is going to be positive for, that's when the virus begins to kind of wane itself out. And so it's 5 days, you can have a negative test after day 5 and 24 hours symptom free. Then by day 14 and that's what it started back in August of last year. We never had a quarantine period over 14 days. And after the 14 days, we never required students to come back with a negative test, for the very reason that after the 14 days, my understanding, the science says that the student is no longer transmissible, even though they may still test positive for the virus.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve this policy.
Second?
I'll second. Jeff Fleetum.
Having a motion and a second, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Boggs, will you call for the vote?
Lane,
Aye.
Covington,
Abstain?
Doolin,
Aye.
Boggs is an aye. Johnson,
Aye.
Fleetum,
Aye.
Hobson,
Aye.
and Watkins.
Aye.
All right, motion carries.
That brings us to item 6, the closing. And I'm getting a screen message on my thing that our internet is unstable, so I might sign out at any minute. Does on the calendar 6A, does anybody have an addition for the August 9th meeting?
So, Mr. President, I'd like to potentially have begin the discussion of the board's expectation in the negotiations of the IGA with our sending districts. I think that's going to require a bit of time, and I think that's a good thing to start sooner rather than later.
I agree.
I also, not on the calendar, but would just like to take this moment while everybody's here to thank Ms. Perez. She's the one that pulled all this together. Tammy is on vacation, and if Ms. Perez wasn't able to do this, I don't know what I would have done. So thank you, Ms. Perez.
Thank you indeed. Anything else? That brings us then to adjournment. Do I have
so
a motion?
moved.
Second.
Ms. Boggs, call for the vote.
Lane,
Aye.
Covington,
Aye.
Doolin,
Aye.
Boggs is an aye. Johnson,
Aye.
Fleetum,
Aye.
Hobson,
Aye.
Watkins.
Aye, if I still have the internet. Meeting
You do.
adjourned.